Here's my attempt of a brain. So here's the brain. Our brain is composed of 4 different lobes. We have our frontal lobe, occipital lobe, never say that right, our parietal lobe, and then our temporal lobe. This is where learning happens in the brain. Now, the temporal lobe is composed of what's called the limbic system. There's different parts that work interconnected together to help us learn, and also part of learning is memory. Basically, recall memory, process shift memory from short term to long term. The limbic system is composed of 3 different parts. So we have the amygdala. I call this the emotional processor. This is where we actually receive the information. A lot of times this is associated with fear or anxiety, which in part it is. The amygdala helps us process all emotions, receiving it and then deciding, okay, is this something that I should be afraid of? So it's the emotional processor. Our hippocampus is converting that. It's making sense of what the amygdala received and then saying, okay, based on what I know, should I continue to be afraid of? And what is that going to look like? That goes into the hypothalamus. Hypothalamus is what I call the physical activator of the emotion. So we've received it through the amygdala, right? We're processing it through our hippocampus, converting it, and then our hypothalamus is the physical converter. This is actually what regulates what's called the pituitary gland, about right here, but that actually releases our hormones. Oxytocin, the love hormone, serotonin, dopamine, the feel-good hormone. Those are all regulated and released by the hypothalamus, then released by the pituitary gland. Now, why is this all important? So the limbic system, between these 3 parts, form neural pathways. Now, what is a neuron? A neuron is basically a building block of a pathway. It basically, right here you get to put RPT. It receives information, it processes information, and it transmits or transfers information. There are 3 different types of neurons that we are worried about. Learning something new or engaging in something we never have before. What composes that chain, right, of our neural pathway is our sensory motor. First, the receiver, right? We receive it, we feel it. That can be physical, a sensory neuron, something that we feel. We pick up the information. Then our interneurons, also known as the facilitation neurons, facilitate, that are kind of conveying the information, right? Transmitting the information from point A to point B. So the interneurons are between the sensory neuron and then between the motor neuron. Comes here, we pick it up, we sense it. The interneuron, okay, so we received it. We're going to move it to the motor neuron, which is our physical response. And that can be a physical movement, going back to the hypothalamus, a hormonal release neuron, something that we're our motor, right? So we receive it, it transmits, and goes to the motor. Building blocks. Now, the spaces in between, you probably have heard these words before in biology class 101 in college. The spaces in between the neurons are called synapses. Now, for a neural pathway to be good, those synapses, the bonds between these neurons need to be strong, locked in. Now, how do we do that? That's how we create long-term memory, strong things that we know, right? Going back to what we've talked in other videos, what do we know versus what we don't know? So the creation and strengthening of neural pathways. Couple things. There's a term called dendritic spines. You guys know I love fitness. So a dendritic spine, and when you have a neural pathway, if something new that we're learning to do, dendritic spine will form. It's like, okay, this is something we don't know. And going back to fitness, right? It's like a muscle when you tear it, right? When you first work out your bicep or your chest or whatever, you create a micro tear in your muscles. And then those can repair themselves and build to become bigger. So I guess to help you understand, a dendritic spine is that tear in your neural pathway to make room for a new neural pathway. And the phrase that I use, neurons that fire together, stay together. An analogy, I'm married, as you guys know. Marriage is not one or the other, it's together. A couple that plays together, stays together, use that phrase however you want, but you get my point. So neurons that fire together and fire frequently together, stay together. So we want synapses, we want these neural pathways to be strong. We want to be able to recall information quickly. We want to really know something. And sometimes, like, for example, when you're explaining something to somebody, have you ever had this where you're talking about something and then you lose your train of thought? That could be attributed to a poor synaptic bond here. You haven't learned it yet. Yeah, the information's in there somewhere, but it hasn't been converted to, I guess we can say converted to long-term memory. You don't really know it. You know it, right? But it's not there yet. It's not permanent. Now, as you guys know, learning is never permanent. Just like fitness, right? Fitness is never permanent. If I stop working out, I'm going to lose everything that I gained. Same thing when you learn something. Sometimes we read something once and like, okay, I know that. I understand it, but you don't really. Because then this is the next part I want to talk about. Activity-dependent remodeling. We need to practice whatever this thing is. The practice I'll give you is reciting, right? We obviously reciting something over and over and over, that can help you learn it. Another exercise is writing. Now, I will say in this day and age, the AI age, right? I love AI. I use it quite a bit. You're able to get a lot of information in front of you and be able to digest that information. However, one thing that I think will be lost is we're not writing down anymore, right? And I don't want to sound old or anything, guys, but you are using a motor neuron when you write. So there's different synapses firing when you're writing versus when you're just reading something. Reading can be one thing you need to do, or reciting in your head. Start writing it down and put them in your own words is something I would say is very, very helpful. Have you ever had that thing where you ever get detention and you had to write something over and over on the board? There's a lot of learning psychology behind that. It's repetition, right? You gotta write this down 100 times on the board. You'll never forget it. Reciting in your head, writing. The next exercise, very powerful for activity-dependent remodeling, is doing. And when we talk about learning out loud, speaking. I'm talking to you guys, right? I'm explaining to you things that I'm learning as I go. You only learn something as you say it. Again, it's very uncomfortable at first, especially when you first start trying to vocalize something. When you keep doing it over and over, eventually it comes out fluid. The analogy that I always use is that I was able to explain this to a child. Can I explain what a neuron is simply? I explain what a neural pathway is. I explain how a neural pathway is formed and how we strengthen it. Okay, guys, learning out loud. That's the most powerful thing that you can do. Again, there's different phases of that: reciting, writing, and then vocalizing. And that can be talking to yourself. My wife thinks I'm crazy because I talk to myself sometimes, but it's because I'm trying to learn something. My wife is sweet. She sometimes listens to me and lets me go on my rants. I have peer groups. Those of you that are in business masterminds, that's what the purpose of that is too, is to vocalize your thoughts and collaborate together so that you're learning something and it's becoming more solid. If you have no one else, then you have yourself, right? You talk to yourself. That's the beauty of it. Hopefully this helps you visually understand. We want to create those strong neural pathways, right? We want to create those strong synaptic bonds. And that is through repetition of the right activities. Share this message if you feel it would benefit somebody else. And in the comments, share something that you're learning right now. What is something that you're struggling with? Maybe you've seen how these principles of learning have worked in your life. And do you agree or disagree with me?